Now, my friends, we left off on our last tape. We said that this one we would begin to speak of the two worlds of Noah in that far-off age and the ancient days of antiquity. We go back in Genesis 6th chapter and the 2nd verse. It clearly states that the sons of God, we're assuming that this is the Adamic man through the line of Seth. It said that they saw the daughters of men, of the men of the non-Adamic race that preceded them to this world. We believe that many of them, that they were the descendants of the great Khans, referred to and washed down to Cain, who had come to this earth as exiles. As I believe that we proved quite conclusively that they were kicked off. And so these people, that they were of a different capacity, that spiritually that they were inferior to what had been genetically programmed into this Semitic type man that was to come later. He who was to catalog all of the different types of creature and livestock that was upon this earth. Now, if this was just one single man, it would have been a physical impossibility. So we turn to Genesis the 6th chapter, 4 and 5. It repeats the same information in slightly different words, bodily implying that the corruption of the earth. Now, my friends, all of this time, for centuries, we have assumed that they were talking about this world. And so was it speaking of this earth that these people have referred to the master builders, or shall we say the mysterious builders of antiquity that appeared in different parts of this globe, and then suddenly great architecture and science begin to appear, as we find the evidence that we pointed out in other chapters of our book that records finely ground lens. And everybody, through reading the Reader's Digest series and all, they finally got on the bandwagon. It's a real money maker there, talking about these strange things and showing the proof that there was brain surgery went on back in the days of great antiquity and so forth. And so, as we say in the 6th chapter of Genesis, verses 4 to 5, they repeat pretty much the same information, only slightly different words here, and they're implying the corruption of a particular world, that people have assumed that it was an Adamic earth, or the home of these strange and mysterious builders who came from beyond the star, and they try to tell us now which participated, I mean to say, in the deluge that resulted from the union of these sons of God with the daughters of men. Now, there is a possibility, like I told you about in the Proverbs, the 8th chapter, right in the very beginning there, it talks about these sons of God. They come down and they visited with the children of men in the habitable parts of the earth. So apparently there's parts that weren't habitable. But I don't believe that we can tie it down and pin it down that this is what caused the great deluge. And I've through the years run into some of these teary-eyed people who said to me, how could the Almighty be so cruel and destroy all the poor little innocent children? And I said, well, if you go back and you find out that he sealed up the womb about 100 years before that. This was the days that people hadn't got into the junk food and they were living off of the natural things, but due to the mixing of the sons of God with the daughters of men, it brought about a great catastrophe wherever it happened. So, but we still haven't learned a lesson by this, but I have another tape that we've lectured on that we cover that subject a little better, so I will leave it alone. But this flood, let's keep this in mind, that it resulted from the union of the sons of God with the daughters of men. Now, Genesis 10:5 also is a very potent witness of the fact that the whole globe, it was scourged, or so it would appear, the fact the whole globe was scourged by the flood. The verse is now quoted intact and verbatim for the convenience of you, the listener, and then they would have us believe that by these Noah's sons and their descendants, they were to escape the deluge. Or they assumed that they were Noah's sons, because I would remind you, you may write me your nasty letters, and I'll be honest with you, probably go in the round file, because I don't have time to argue with people or get into long correspondence proving every jot and tittle. I just say to people, listen to the tapes, look it up for yourself, and accept it or reject it. Because, friends, I'm not looking for followers. I'm not starting a church building. I don't want people sitting on my doorsteps, and I do not claim to have all of the answers. But I'm searching and opening up a lot of avenues for you to consider so that you don't become one of these mushhead religionists that's overripe because of the sloppy agape. But excuse me, I have to remind you once again of Ezekiel, the 14th chapter. What was it, a half a dozen times there? They said they saved not son or daughter. Go back and you read Job. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And I have pointed out to you before, you cannot believe what a great catastrophe that actually went on there. And the Greeks tell about it, and they understood it better than the so-called Christendom or the religious world today. The sons, the 7 of them, they represented greater worlds, and the daughters, 3 of them, represented smaller worlds. And then a wife represented 1. And then Job, he constituted the 12. I don't know. I've got to be very honest. And a lot of people ask me about this, I believe it's Theodore Sitchin. And I've skimmed 3 of his books. And I think that he's probably one of the outstanding writers of our time. You can take all these other UFO books and strange books and unexplained books of mystery and so forth. But this man, he seems to know his onions. He seems to have the facts together, and he brought out some pretty exciting things. Now, let's understand something. Let's reason together with me. This Messiah, this Yeshua, this Emmanuel incarnate, the Savior of his people, he points to Noah. And my friends, I really don't believe Christendom ever understood a thing about it. And why the world, I said, of Noah was destroyed. And then points out on a smaller scale of Sodom and Gomorrah. In other words, a flashback. In this case, it was only 2 wicked cities. But the only thing we learn by history is that we do not learn by history. And you think that all of these Swishy people from the Swiss Alps here in our nation and this world, they would learn, but they don't. That is what I find so very sad. But the point is that if Job, none of his family was spared, well, why in the world was Noah's family spared? When Ezekiel in the 14th chapter said, hey, Noah didn't save his sons or his daughters, just like Job. Job didn't save any. We read the account of Job. He lost everything. He lost his livestock, his great estates, his mansions, all of his great wealth. He lost it all. See, consider that. Keep that in mind. So now, there's something wrong with this Genesis account and Noah and his sons by these so-called Noah's sons and their descendants who supposedly escaped the deluge, where the isles of the Gentiles or the shall we say, Noatian people were divided into their lands, and every one of them after his tongue and their families and their nations. And this is something else that the people ignore today. See, God is a racist. If he was standing here in the person, he'd call him a bit. It's prophesied, it is written, as Christ said himself. He never gave you chapter and verse. That was added centuries later. But he said, it is written. In those days he will again set the bounds on all nations. It talks about the calamity and the hell that's coming down on this earth, and says, every man shall flee back to his own nation, and the Almighty will put every man back under his own vine and his own fig tree, and never again will man transgress this divine holy law, because the Almighty said he made everything it was, and he made it after his own kind. So if this offends the government, if this offends the church, then that means that God offends you. And then maybe that puts you in a position you are offensive to the Almighty. Now, goes on, he talks about, he said he put them in there after their tongues and after their families and their nations. And the time with which the passage deals with was supposedly shortly after the flood or the great deluge, only after 2 short generations removed from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they would have us believe the sons of Noah. And then we go back and we see in Genesis 10th chapter verses 2, 3, and 4, and it tells us the flood did destroy all human life on the whole globe except for the one family of Noah. And as some so stoutly maintain, and now I would ask them this: how does it happen that within just 1 century after this great tragedy, now reason with me, friends, or approximately thereabouts, that there were still so-called Gentiles on the earth? Gentiles, my friends, means nations. Whether it's a heathen nation or whether it's a nation of Christendom, the Semitic people, what have you. Now, how does it happen that these nations were not all of the blood of Noah and his issue, and were not only living there on the plains of Shinar? You remember, my friends, where they fought the gold of Ophir, and tens of thousands of men died there? We proved this in our other tapes and the books, where I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's my opinion, that the Phoenicians were in reality the Mayans, who preceded the Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Adamic, Nordic, Aryan, Teutonic, Lombardic, Germanic, and Basque type people. And we remember, as we read there in the Old Testament, that these Phoenicians, who I maintain were the Mayans, that every 3 years they brought this gold to Solomon. I think Solomon, this was one of his downfalls and his hanky-pank, and he was being bought off by these Mayans, or we get from the name the people of Mu, who brought the 40 tons of gold to Solomon from Peru. And we went through all that, how they had to go up and down the river and the water courses, and it's not easy, because everything would have to depend on what time of year when the rivers are up. And 40 tons, my friends, that's 80-some thousand pounds. So that's a lot of gold to transport. But we remember that we talk about who were these people. They weren't all of the same blood of Noah and his issue that were living here, and they were living in the plains of Shinar, and they had families also, and even nations. And indeed, these so-called Gentile, or these heathen nations, they would had to have been workers of miracles, to say the least, to have multiplied so rapidly and so fast as to father whole nations within just a few years. Stop and figure it out, my friends. Mathematically, genetically, none of this computes if we start to think a little bit. It is well, too, that we figure in this connection to examine, go back and look again at Genesis 10:32 with care, especially the latter part where it reads, and it goes on, by these, the families of the sons of Noah were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. And it goes on about all the factors that apply to the discussion here of Genesis 10:5 and the preceding paragraphs that we've quoted to you here apply to the passage also. How any student of this deluge narrative can also read verses in the Bible such as the one that we're quoting and thinking that the whole earth was destroyed by a great visitation is one of the mysteries that must remain unexplicable to us, or unexplainable, I'm trying to say. Now, if that's true, then there were two worlds. One of them was our globe at the time of Adam, down to beyond the days of Noah, and it's been shown that if such a case is fitted, that a quest would have to be launched here for us to try to determine some relative facts as to what was the location, the size, and the general characteristics of each of these two worlds. Now, we're not going to cover it probably in this tape or in the next tape, but I'm going to make a statement right now that'll blow your socks off while I bring up the pyramids and I bring up Mars. And you notice that great pyramid, if you get this book, or you've probably seen it on TV, and I've told people and lectured on it over the last few years, that the great flood took place on Mars. There was great canals all over it, and you notice where this great pyramid that they point out is located, it seems to be right on a canal, which would be like the Nile here in our nation, where just happenstancely, I believe would be the word, that the Pyramid of Giza sits. And I believe that it's possible, it's going to make a lot of these people, these pyramid people, awfully mad. And they want to say that Enoch and Job and God's little honeys built it. But remember Cain, who was called the sun god. He was called he had a lot of great titles. He was called the great hunter. He was called the leopard king. You find evidence of that. I even brought a vase back from one of the great Inca kings of Peru and had leopards on the handle in commemoration of an ancient great leopard king that was a great Khan, or the Cuckoo Khan, which I believe meant in those days of antiquity the great king of kings, the great Khan. Now, why couldn't he have built that pyramid? If he was a hybrid half-son of the Adamic family and possessed from that gene pool all of that great intelligence and knowledge and ability and science beyond what the primitives, why couldn't he have come here and built that? Well, that doesn't fit in there with excuse me, their religion and what they believe. I'm not saying that's a fact, but I'm saying it is a possibility. But we never like to give our adversary any credit for having intelligence. But my friend, he's been whipping the hell out of it time immemorial. Doesn't the scripture say children of this world? What? They're more intelligent. They're wiser, it says, than the sons of God. He tells us, and the European male, he doesn't understand this. It tells us quite clearly. He says, be wise and gentle the dove. And you go back to the great Khans, you go back to the Mayans, the Toltecs, the Incas, and they tell of the great descendant came from heaven, and they sat under, and you drive across maples of the serpent. I just discovered in the last 75 years, something like that, 50 years ago. But you find it all over the world, the serpent mounds, and Ohio, and everywhere. So be wise as the serpent and gentle as the dove. The dove, where it talks about the Spirit, the God, that descended at the time of Christ at the baptism, when it talked about the great ship that descended like a dove. It said, be gentle as these people, but be wise also as the serpent. But no, we do not listen, we do not hear. We are deaf, we're dumb, we're blind, and we perish for lack of knowledge. So I would say after a thorough study of the matter, as we go through many manuscripts and several sciences in addition to the Bible science and the apparent, we'll call it pyramid science, it seems to appear quite obvious, if you have a discerning mind, that the deluge, it plagued quite a small portion of the earth's total surface. And none of the continent of Africa, you don't find any evidence that that was part of the locale of the flood, nor any of Europe or Asia Minor or the two Americas or of Australia were ever materially or physically injured by this great catastrophe. Thus we have left with Asia Minor alone at the scene of this occurrence, and not all of it by any means. But my friends, here, bear with me, keep this in mind. Maybe write a note down and keep this in mind. The so-called flood that we're going to pinpoint that happened here on this earth. Now, the Chinese, we're going to get into this later and give the names of the people that in the Chinese of their Noah, and the Egyptian names and some of these other names. We're going to go to it. But my friends, this let's call it all the great of war. What we're looking at is a side effect of a battle. A great catalytic upheavals of a magnitude such as man had never seen since recorded history. I grant you that. I would give that. I would agree to that. But this was just little side issues that happened in the Shuhai Empire of the Chinese and the Egyptian pharaoh there, Pepi. But my friends, what caused these calamities and that section of it? It was caused by a great disturbance in space. And as it passed over in this part of the earth, it rolled to and fro the drunken killer, which prophesied again, I believe, of the age and day and time possibly of which we are standing in. So remember, my friends, I don't disagree that there wasn't some floods. I can't deny this recorded history. I'd be a fool. But it was merely a side effect and a cause of something that happened out there in the Diluvian age in space. And what all's recorded here, if it's correct, this was just little side issues, just a small battle, which was part of a great war. Keep that in mind. If you go back and listen to it again, it's so simple, but keep it in mind. Now thus we find here we're left with Asia Minor alone as the scene of a strange occurrence. And not all of it by any means, probably a mere 5% or so of the surface of the largest continent constitutes the amount of territory that we're speaking about here that was actually affected by or destroyed by these great amounts of water. Perchance some of you that I could be reminded here that what we stated earlier in this, what do we call it, tape or traditions of the flood, were universally, what's the word I'm certain, diffused, shall we say, by the ancient people who even make it more clear. And we start to wonder how this came to be with only 5% or less of just one continent that was involved in the destruction. The answer to this seemingly great paradox here is ample evidence available to support, to firm up the belief that I have that there was much more to this, and that there was constant communication between the people of all the continents in the days of antiquity. And not only that, as I have stated before, my friends, I think that there was great intercourse between the peoples of the earth and the galaxy out there. There was intergalactic commerce, that there was verbal and financial intercourse between them, and also sexually. This is what brought about the destruction of the lost world of Noah, or Noe, N-O-E, as he was also called, even in your scripture. And so we're looking for that world. Don't get hung up and stalemated here by the side effects. don't be as misled or blinded as some of these silly people that in order to remain their denomination, they got to believe that the flood was worldwide, and then you get this other clique over here. No, they want to sound very authoritative, and they say, I believe it was in the upper Tarim Basin in the Hongshan Mountains of China, and the floodwaters came down for 3.5 years from the Yao River, and it killed millions and millions of Chinese and all. Hey, that sounds terrific, my friends, but let us look beyond. Let's look back at quarters. I had a little quote here, if I could find it, one that I may not be able to find. I made a note of it here somewhere. All right, here. Further through the darkness have I gazed than most, and only endless splendor do I see beyond. So, my friend, when other people look down the tunnel, they see darkness, and others see a light. And to them it's a negative thing, because they say, my God, there's a train attached to it. So I say, keep looking up and watch, because our redemption's drawing nigh. But anyway, so let's see, where was I? We were talking about, let's go back for a moment to the science of the Great Pyramid, that a lot of people believe that it proves that its wonderful master builders, they had a vast and intimate knowledge of such facts as the exact size and the shape of the earth, and the numbers and the distribution of the continents and the major seas. It seems quite reasonable within the bounds of reason, therefore, that they also knew the various peoples of the earth and whatever quarters they resided. Now, you remember, we're going to cover some more. I have some other terrific Chinese history that helps prove this out from some other, like a lot of people get mad and they say, well, your only evidence is the Bible. And so they get upset, so I go outside of that, and then the Christians, they get upset with me. So you see, there's just no pleasing some of these knotheads, so I don't worry about it at all. But also, there they go on, they seem to know these people all seem to know about each other in the various parts of this world and whatever quarters they resided, and indeed, it seems quite probable that we go back, we find the homeland of some of the Adamic people of the ancient days. I believe they were the world leaders in the science and religion, and so we talk about the great civilizations of Han and the great vendettas, and we talk about the great men of that study from the book of Mu that come out of the land of Indra that we know today as India, and we see that these civilizations, they rose and they collapsed, but so much for that. We go back, and so we try to study through their and their general code, and we find from this that the world of the sons of God, that they carried on extensive commerce, and they planted various degrees of civilization among all of the world of men. So we find in this matter that the story of the deluge was perhaps, shall we call it, universally diffused, even anciently, centuries before the Bible was written or carried into all lands, as in the case today. Now we find a lot of these authorities on the subject that they agree that there is but one region on the entire earth which would meet perfectly with their story that proves that the flood took place in this area. But my friends, I'm not going to be limited by that. I'll look at that battle, and I might agree with that, but I want to look at the overall war and see what truly went on here. And so they know that the requirements of this antediluvian homeland of the what many of these people of this persuasion they call the master builders, and a lot of these Masons, they like to rejoice, maybe rightfully so, I don't know, I've not been one, but they've been so secretive about it and kept it to themselves where the whole damn world is collapsing around them. Maybe it's time they shared some of their secrets, if they know so many great secrets. But they seem to like to take pride in and go back to the great building of Solomon's temple, and they go back and they claim that like Paul said that he was a Mason or a Masano or one of the master builders, but then there's a lot of people in Christendom the suspect of him. Gets kind of spooky, my friends, and you go on down the line, these people that believe, and they trace back these people that knew the requirements of the antediluvian homeland of the what they say were the master builders, and they try to credit this to the Masons, the same in which Adam and Eve, they sought sanctuary, that they try to tell us, from their expulsion from India, in which they and their many descendants through Seth dwelt for some 1700 years prior to the deluge. Concerning that land, this people, and this culture, and the following facts are accepted, some people believe, even in some of the scientific quarters. But now I'm talking about, I'm quoting from back 25, 30 years ago. But since then, it's probably the scientists don't care one way or the other. But now we were led to believe by the historical records that this country was quite sterile, of such a nature that people could sustain themselves there solely by, it was of most, well, in other words, super hard work, my friends. And a lot of people tried to say that this is fulfilling the curse that was placed upon Adam kind. That's you white boys. And they said that, you know, you were going to get your bread, in other words, beef farmers, you're going to get it by the sweat of your brow. Now, I have some in-laws and outlaws that are farmers, and I don't see them old boys sweat too hard. I see them riding around these big dually air-conditioned tractors with stereos and portable TV sets. I even have one that claimed he can lock his tractor in there where follow the furrow, and that way he doesn't miss any of his soap operas. So maybe the curse was lifted. It sounds like another one was put on him. And then the government sees you having too much fun, they come over and take that away from you. So we go back, they claim that this country, as I say, it was quite sterile, and the people had to work their backsides off with very hard labor. A fact that is borne out by Genesis, the 3rd chapter, 17th, 18th, and 19th verse. It was yet unsuitable, and it was accursed, as were the land soil and the climatic conditions for normal human habitation. Now, my friends, why do they call Mars the red planet? I don't claim to know. Is it because there's a lot of clay? Sounds to me like if this is where they went to when they were cast out of the garden. Now we're talking about before the flood, pre-diluvian. And then they screwed up there again, cohabitating with the daughters of men, or the Enosh, or the ancient people that were indigenous to that area. And they got kicked out of there to this planet. Now, I know this sounds pretty far-fetched, but let's consider it. And so the descendants of Seth and their issue, they built up therein, wherever this place was, over a period of several hundred years, one of the grandest civilizations known to existed as recorded in history, or any age within the period covered by history, from the nations of these, well, whether they're masons or not, we'll call them master builders, and some of their finest sons, probably they numbered into the thousands, and as I say, they had intergalactic commerce, and they journeyed into old Egypt, which could have been, millions of light years, tens of thousands away from their habitation. About the year BC 2644, there was something odd happened then. There started to rise this marvelous, what, as I said, some call the House of Glory, or Cheops, the Pyramid of Giza. And when they completed that great structure, they returned home, where these, and I don't know about the dates, I could be off there, where they, as I spoke in other tapes about these Hyksos of shepherd kings, who mysteriously came into Egypt, and without any force or show of force, or hurting anybody, they shut down all of their pagan temples, and they said, you will not open them again. And so it seemed to be peace and harmony, and a great culture survived there for a long period of time, until these mysterious Hyksos shepherd kings, that they disappeared mysteriously, and who knows where. Was it back to the planet Mars? The planet of canals and rivers? Well, anyway, they returned home. So the great pyramid that they have enshrined here for posterity of a distant age, was it for today? Was it truly supposed to be a witness's stone as a sign for us in the latter days? And if so, when we look at it, and we look at the pyramids on Mars, and we can start to piece against together this history here, and we say, wait a minute, man. I know that as we read Donnelly, he was about 100 years ago, he wrote the book Lost Atlantis, and he showed how the tools and so forth that they would find in Hawaii matched up with those in Africa and New Guinea and so forth, that at one time those great land bridges and continents between here and Africa and Europe, and all man and beast had to do was to walk back and forth. But then they say the god or the gods became angry and wanted to segregate and separate the people, and so he destroyed the land bridges and the continents. But, my friends, as I think I've pointed out in past writings and tapes, let us consider the possibility that Adam, prior to coming to this planet, he goofed again. What if he did live on Mars? And that was a land of clay. There was very little topsoil. Who knows? I mean, now, granted, I'm doing some real wild guessing here, but let's consider that possibility that world or that planet had to engage in commerce with these other people, and maybe it was some of the sons of Noah and his family. They came down here on earth to the habitable parts of this earth to talk with the sons of the Enosh people. Enosh meaning a type of people, and usually referred to as a pre-Adamite, those that preceded the Adamic man to this earth. Were they dealing with them in commerce, like wheat and grain and barley? And were they trading knowledge and building palaces, or did these primitive people like at Tiwanaku and Chichen Itza and all of those, did they build these effigies in remembrance of the gods who came in the great ships of space, who came here and took tithes of their wheat and their livestock and took them back to their planet to ease the burden of struggling so hard from a soil or a land that did not produce under their tools or what have you. It's just a possibility. It's just something for us to consider, because it points out that it was a land that seemed to be sterile, and the people had a terrible time trying to sustain themselves. And so then we find out that some of the grandest civilizations that were to ever exist arose. But now, if these figures are correct, and this is what a lot of us have assumed for the last half centuries, that these figures are correct, so let's forget what I believe, and let's say 4004 BC, or King James says from Adam to Christ. I think it's talking about his arrival someplace. I think I proved conclusively that the Adam kind has been around for time without end and will continue to be so. But the point that I'm trying to bring out, my friends, for you to consider is, what was he doing in the interim, this Adam kind? And what if I am correct about 7,500 years of the history of the Adamic Semitic type man from now going back. You have now if you want, you've got 2,000 years you have to account for. Or if I'm correct, you've got 3,500 years you have to account for and explain where was Adam and what was he doing and what was Noah doing and what was Job doing and what brought all this about. See, Noah was telling you, or Job was telling you about the flood, as we erroneously call it. He shows you what went on in the pre-Diluvian age that led up to the destruction of many planets. And he shows that they were supposed to be keeping feast days and holy days. You know, it's kind of like the pasteurized pastors of today. We don't keep anything but the feast of Ishtar and bunny rabbits and eggs and old Saint Nick and Santa Claus and all this Christmas crap. It doesn't please the Almighty. Now, if you prefer, I'll use the biblical thing and I say the dung. The dung. And that is definitely what it is, my friends. And so suddenly our progenitors go from having built one of the grandest, most exciting civilizations that ever existed or was alluded to in any of man's recorded history or any other age or period covered by any type of history, from the nation of the great master builders and the finest sons probably that numbered into the thousands that journeyed into Egypt as the hikes of shepherd kings, and they left and they went millions of light years back to their other planet, back and forth, and leaving Egypt. And this was did all of this take place in the year of 2644, and it was then they began to start to raise this marvelous house of glory that, in my opinion, that was a great possibility. It was nothing more than a pump, and maybe we'll go into it in one of these tapes and explain how it reads. And I don't know if that book is even available anymore that the man come up with, that these people from outer space, they showed these primitives, and it was probably to their advantage also that they would be able to raise rice and oats and wheat and barley and all of these different things. And the more these people of this planet could raise, the more they could do business with them, so they would, both worlds, shall we say, the best of two worlds, could enjoy the fruits of their labor. And so I believe that there's a lot of great proof there that these people came from Mars, your progenitors, and they taught them how to build one on the Nile. But everybody, even in the Christian religious world, we have to make a mystical, esoteric, religious symbol about it. And anytime somebody gets in the corner, we use the old Catholic priest cop out, and they say, "My son, that's one of the great unknowns." Well, anyway, so who really built this house of glory? And when they had completed the great structures, I say they must have returned home. And then the idea that they were secure in the knowledge that this great house of light, or whatever you want to call it, they had enshrined for all posterity and even to the distant age, the day that we're living in, that we may look at it and we may look at the evidence brought back by NASA and our government, and we, like the old saying, one picture's worth 10,000 words, and we say, my God, I could have had a V8. Well, it's time that we stop to consider and think about some of these things. Now, my friends, at this time I would ask you, please turn your tape over to side 2, and we will continue in our search for truth. Thank you.